First off, I will be referring to what people call Sasquatch or Bigfoot as the Sabe. And this is the name that the First Nations peoples refer to the so-called Sasquatch with. There are other names that are used, but for this video, I'll just refer to them as the Sabe. Secondly, I want to send a shout out to the homie who hooked me up with this information, the link to this channel. I've been binge watching this guy's channel for some time now, probably about 2 months, maybe like 3 months, something like that. But he uploads videos pretty regularly, and the shorthand version of his channel is that he has opened up his website and his channel to receiving emails from people who have had Sabe experiences firsthand, or if they've had whatever kind of experience that they've had dealing with the Sabe. He lets them email them, and then he reads their emails right on camera. And the details of this information, having heard it over and over and over again from different people, it's just irrefutable evidence that something is going on with these beings. They exist in some kind of format. And not only that, but there's a conscious effort to keep their existence from being known to the masses. And with this video, I wanted to, first of all, introduce his channel, but also share my perspective of why the Sabe beings are being hidden from the mass knowingness. Because just like all the other historical evidence that has been hidden, you can go into heliocentrism, and all this stuff is connected too. There's a reason behind it. Why? There's a reason behind why the so-called intellectual institutions are pretty much designed to keep people dumb, to keep people dormant, to keep people from questioning their reality, to keep people following the system of authority, to conform to the systems all the way from preschool all the way up into the university system. So it's not just the actual system that is maintaining this conformity, it's the information within the system. So why would these educational systems want to hide the Sabe? Well, first off, how much information, how much weight is centered on the Darwinian evolution program? From historical weight all the way up until what the systems are pushing for the future in regards to transhumanism. First realization in that is, when you believe in Darwinian evolution, then you accept the dumbed down nature of the human experience. You accept that we came from monkeys, we came from nothing, we came from this animalistic background, and the basic nature, the wartime nature, this animal nature of destruction and war and all of the garbage that's going on is accepted because we're still evolving. We're still one step away from monkeys. We're still one step away from the jungle. So when you accept that these educational institutions are placed on a pedestal inherently because they represent the smartest of the smart, the most evolved of the evolved, and that holds a certain weight of authority. And that authority is transitioned straight into, or channeled straight into, the systems of authority in the so-called justice system and all of the other systems that are around the world that maintain control of the masses and push this war brings peace mentality. So accepting the Darwinian evolution program is accepting the systems of intellectual authority through the education system and the university system overall. If you break that down, if that system starts to break down because other beings are put into the mix, then what's going to happen is that the masses of people are going to start to question their reality, question the authority that this information came from, and start to unveil all of the other lies that have been interwoven into this mass enslavement program. It's basically just like one little thread on this loosely woven quilt of mind control. And once you start pulling on that one little thread, the entire veil just starts to disassemble itself, and it will crumble underneath its own weight. This is what a lot of people realize when they start investigating any one sort of conspiracy theory or one perspective that goes counter to the mainstream belief system. You'll start to realize that all these other systems are interconnected, and there's a few pictures painted on that veil, on that quilt. And it's not designed to keep you warm, it's designed to keep you blind. So once you insert another being into the Darwinian evolution program, first of all, the Darwinian evolution program is just bullshit, so that will crumble. But the mechanism of it crumbling will be even more active when you have an entirely new being inserted into this concept. So you have entire systems within the university system is sitting on the foundation of Darwinian evolution. Most of the sciences in the university system are resting. The infrastructure is based upon a lot of these illusions. The illusions of the theoretical universe, the theory of gravity, the Big Bang theory, all of these laws, Newtonian laws, all of these systems will come under fire. They'll be questioned by the masses. Once one of them, if even one of them, are challenged, that puts a question on all of them up there. And it's just like a leader. When you have a leader in your face and you see one little chink in their armor, the masses, their followers, will start to question their authority. So they can't show one shred of weakness, because one little thread of weakness shown will unravel the entire system. So these systems of authority are held up by the university system. The university system is held up by Darwinian evolution and all of these other theories that are pushed out by these mainstream scientists that are still worshipped to this day. Not only will the system start to crash, but the people will start to question the people who were pushing this information. These so-called intellectuals, the masses will realize that these so-called intellectuals were knowingly pushing this information. They were knowingly aware that much of this, all of it, is bullshit. And they will have to answer for these lies that have been going on for centuries. So the accountability of these individuals, not only of the system, but the individuals, will have to be accountable for these lies. This is why these scientists and these professors stick together, and they only go so far. And when you start to question them, they start to project their narcissistic personalities onto you. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a perfect example of this. You can see the arrogance in his interactions all the time. He's just a big bully. Most of these scientists are big bullies because their egos are based largely in narcissism. So when they start to admit this crime, these crimes that have been going on for centuries, they're going to have to admit the conscious effort to de-evolve people. Why were they doing this? For control. Control towards what? So once the masses start to question the systems of control, they're going to start to question what those control measures were moving towards. So all of the futurism programs that have been pushed on the masses, like transhumanism and everything connected to that, those will also crash. So all of the money-making schemes that are connected to that, no different than the money-making schemes connected to climate change. How much money are people getting from pushing this sustainable living mindset? It's a racket hidden under the guise of caring for people, caring for the earth, caring for nature. No, they only care about themselves and profit and control. So once you start to entertain the idea of something as simple as the Sabe, you'll see how everything else is connected to that. This is no different than the government acknowledging that so-called black people are not from Africa, that the majority of so-called black people are indigenous, aboriginal Americans. Once you start to accept that, this is why even the reparations question is a threat. Because once what's connected to that, you'll have all these First Nations people start to come out of the woodwork they'll have to acknowledge that it's not just reparations that they should receive. It's entire land, it's entire systems. Acknowledging the need for reparations also acknowledges guilt. It acknowledges the crimes that these systems, that these companies, these corporations have been doing. It acknowledges and accepts the guilt of the legacies that have been passed down to the people who are still alive today. A lot of the people who are trying to avoid a lot of this information, people who are in the White House, their legacy that has been passed down to them will be seen for what it is, a farce. It's bullshit. You have people living in the streets right now, while their slave masters, the descendants of their slave masters, are living in mansions. My family is a first-hand example of this. My ancestors descended from the original rice plantations in Louisiana. And those slave holders, those slave owners, were white slave owners who married with other powerful white families and passed their wealth, their legacy, onto their children. While the descendants of the slaves, because one of the big story with my family was that the son of the father who owned the plantation had an entire family with one of the slave women. And my fathers, on my father's side, descended from those slaves. So they built their legacy on the backs of my ancestors and continue. They have this giant family reunion in like Vegas every year, and our family doesn't even really interact with them at all. And a lot of them are beyond wealthy, while the descendants of the slaves are, basically just getting by. So that's just one microcosm of the macrocosm that is an entire nation of people who are dealing with this same storyline. So even acknowledging that this story is valid for even talking about is a threat to the systems of authority and control. And they don't want to do that. Like I said, once you start unraveling one little thread in that quilt, the entire system is going to implode on itself. So once you start unraveling one little thread in the quilt of Darwinian evolution, the mainstream human storyline that people are believing in, you're not only going to unravel what people believe for the past, you're going to unravel the authority and the control of the people in the present, and you're going to unravel the control and the authority of the systems that they're trying to push for the future. And when you do that, you're going to start to empower people. People are going to start to see that they're not going to be subjected to, in this de-evolution program, you have people who are limiting their strength. They're believing that they are just powerless beings. In that Darwinian evolution program, there's an inherent separation from something more than a happy mistake that the human experience is from a big bang. Oops, dinosaurs were created. Oops, monkeys. Oops, humanity. So you start to empower yourself and you start to disempower the systems of control and authority over you. You start to not believe in them anymore. And the belief in that system, just like mainstream religions, the belief is where the power comes from. This is why I said the people in the middle are the most dangerous, is because they are maintaining the belief of the people. Largely, people aren't following the head politicians out there. They're following the people who look like them, who relate to them, who they are following the higher politicians. So you have a system of politics that's going to crash. You have a systems of educations that are going to crash. You have the systems of authority that are going to crash. You have the future systems of control that are going to crash. All of the foundations of these systems are threatened. Beyond that, in this system of control and authority, you have this idea that humans are the highest on the food chain because our evolved intelligence has put us in a position to not only have the power to destroy all of life on this earth and potentially destroy the entire earth, but we have been empowered with this intelligence to caretake for the earth. We're the caretakers of the living beings. We're the caretakers of earth. We have to take care of everything. Why? Because we've evolved into this intelligent being over the rest of the animal kingdom. So once you enter in the Sabe, which once you start listening to these storylines, you'll realize a system of intelligence. You'll realize that there's this potential for powers that these beings have. Powers that we may have had at one point in time. Powers that we may have right now, but we have been de-evolved out of that realization. This is another part of that unveiling of this information. What are the things that we are capable of that we are not tapping into because we've been tapped into a system of control? How much authority and control will be removed once we start empowering ourselves? What's going to happen once we start communicating with these beings and they start to tell us about our own power? Once we reconnect to nature, once we reconnect to the organic systems that are outside of the mainstream control measures. So we'll be lower on the intellectual food chain once we start to acknowledge the existence of the Sabe. That's another threat to this system of authority and control. We will no longer be the caretakers of the entire Earth experience. If you have beings like the Sabe who could potentially have the power to jump in and out of dimensions, to communicate telepathically, to control systems like time and so on and so forth, all of these things that we've been convinced are non-existent or science fiction, those things becoming a reality are a direct threat to the system of control. The current system of authority will be seen as completely powerless, empty, dead. On top of all this, you have the stories of the Sabe beings being largely central to a lot of these national parks, not limited to national parks, but mostly within national parks. Part of that story is these parks have been blocked off and turned into national parks because of these beings, as a means for the government to control the awareness of these beings. So part of that, acknowledging that the Sabe beings exist, is that once the people start to speak on this on a mass scale, a lot of this land, a lot of that control of that land will have to be given back to the people, given back not only to us, but given back to the Sabe. It'll be protected in a different way. It will be no longer under the control of the government, but it'll be given back to the Sabe. Once you start giving back land to beings that were once unknown, that will start to open up the doors to giving back land to the indigenous people. There's another reason why the Sabe beings cannot be acknowledged for existing, because once you start to talk about our relationship with land, their relationship with land and nature, then you're going to have to go into, well, who owns this land? Where does this authority of ownership and control come from? Where did it originate? Were those acts of Congress lawful? Is there anything we can do about that today? Well, if they start doing that for the Sabe beings, they're going to have to start doing that for the indigenous people. And like I said, pulling that thread is just going to unravel the entire system of authority. Acknowledging this storyline will leave this system of authority powerless in many different ways. So this is why the system has to control the opposition. They have to control the questioning of this reality, this storyline, with commercial versions of the story on channels like Discovery Channel and Hollywood movies. They have to address that this exists in some kind of way, but allow the storyline to only go so far. Because if you just didn't acknowledge it at all, then the people will start to research this information on their own. And they will come to the answers and conclusions on their own. And once you do that, you'll have people coming to answers and conclusions that go beyond the systems of authority and control. So they want to give you soft answers, soft conclusions, busy work, like these ghost shows and Sasquatch shows where people are just running around still questioning whether these beings exist and looking for the existence, caught up in the questioning consciousness rather than the knowingness consciousness. Once people are caught up in that questioning, investigative consciousness forever, the people who are watching that information, they inherently start to install this artificial knowingness. And that artificial knowingness is exactly where the system wants people to be, because it's placed in a space of ego. And then you have this intelligence, people believing and not believing, and then you have the storyline is now placed in a realm of elevator talk. It's storylines that are designed to only go so far. It's like, oh well, who knows? That whole consciousness. Who knows what's really going on? Ha 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 ha. Let's just move on. Nobody really knows. When people say that nobody really knows, they're really saying, well, the government hasn't told us what they know about this, so we don't know, because the government has been placed in the system of authority inside people's minds. Once the government or the system of authority acknowledges that something exists, that's when people will say, finally, oh, I guess we do know. This is how far those tentacles of authority have gone into our everyday reality, our very existence, how we communicate with each other. Nobody really knows. The establishment of intellectual authority hasn't told us what to believe in yet, so that's what I mean by saying nobody really knows. It's bullshit. So another part of this acknowledging of the Sabe beings is to acknowledge their existence. You're acknowledging their relationship to nature. In acknowledging their relationship to nature, you're opening the door to acknowledging our relationship to nature. And when you're acknowledging any kind of relationship to nature, you're acknowledging the counterproductive reality of this modern form, westernized version of existence, the destructive nature of it, and how separated from nature it is, how parasitic of nature it is. In acknowledging that connection to nature, this is another form of empowering the masses. It's empowering the masses and disempowering the systems of authority and control which parasite off of nature, off of the people. And lastly, for this video, there are more things that are connected to this. But lastly, for this video, once you start to acknowledge and even start to question the existence of these beings, you start to go into history itself. You start to disassemble history as a whole. Because like I said, once you question the authority of control, you're questioning where that information comes from. So if they've lied about one thing, who's to say they haven't lied about 10 other things? So the systems of heliocentrism are up for question now. Do the Sabe believe that we live on a globe in an infinite universe hurling through space, spinning around? Do the Sabe people believe that we went to the moon? Do the Sabe believe that the sun is 93 million miles away? What do the Sabe beings think of the universe as a whole? Every system of control will start crumbling down once people start to question just one little thing. So this is why I see even acknowledging the existence of the Sabe is very threatening to the systems of authority and control. And if you start to tune into the stories that people have been talking about on the How to Hunt channel, you'll start to see a bunch of other stories that are connected to this and what it all means. So I would highly suggest checking it out. If you have stories of your own, send him an email. He's open to it. He reads them all the time. He's a very good storyteller, and a lot of his information that he shares personally is very relevant and interesting. And I'll link his channel in the description below.